Russ, it might be useful to just speak a little bit about the fabric, so-called, versus the map. And so when you said you've got that data, I think what you're referring to is that you have access to the broadband service location fabric. That is to say, what addresses the FCC is now going to collect data from the carriers like you to match against that fabric. Is that fair, Russ?
That is correct. Yeah, it's location specific fabric now versus census blocks and census tracts and that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So we're down to that fabric.
Okay, so why is the fabric like faulty versus the data that's going to match against the fabric? Like what, can you just explain what the problems you're seeing?
Because the addresses that are coming up are fictitious.
Okay.
So they've got addresses that don't exist, right? The addresses are not matching up with what we have been doing. The company I'm working for right now has been serving this area for 130 years. They know.
Drew did say mythical. So I guess, right. We did say it's.
Yeah, and so the data has come in, and our first look at this data, there's at least 30% of this data is garbage, right? It's just stuff that just doesn't exist. So now we've got to go back and it's called a challenge versus like a collaborative work process, right? We're now having to challenge, which feels already of conflict. But we're going to have to go back and give them better location data, and then see if they accept our location data that we know better than anybody because we've been serving it for 130 years. So it's an interesting process, and how quickly they'll turn this this carrier around will be, it's going to be interesting. So I think in my little humble opinion, it's been my opinion since I've been working for the states, is states should be out there taking care of themselves, right? They should be building some maps right now to kind of really understand where they're at. And I think a lot of states are. And I think that's still good work that needs to get done, so they can also be part of that conversation.
Do you think there's some collaboration with some of the states that are doing that type of work? Because some states are actually really, really doing an exceptional job in trying to validate the data. Is there any collaboration, do you know of, that where they're working with some of the states that are investing heavily in trying to get accurate maps?
What's scary, Brian, is when, because I stood a map up in Wyoming, then I stood one up in Washington. And what's scary is the FCC called me when they were going through this process of mapping. And they really didn't listen to anything I was saying at the time. They were so dead set on, we've got $96 million. We're going to spend it on our map in our way that we know is right. And we don't have to listen to you guys. Though I got an audience with them, one on their board of 4 or 5 or 6, wherever they were. It was really a very cold conversation. There was no real conversation of collaboration or leveraging the data that we had at the time. So it felt more adversarial than it did feel like it was going to be a collaborative discussion around how we're going to build maps. And I think, again, the behemoth, that you've got of the FCC out there had $96 million in their pocket. They had a very big national contract that they've been working with, and they continued with that company. And they felt like that was the best direction. And it really didn't feel like they were party to any conversations that we were having in the beginning. So I'm not confident in the collaborative approach.
I would say that's kind of common, I think, for everyone. I will shout out to Drew, read an article that he wrote recently about state mapping and federal mapping and how it's kind of coming to a head now or soon that, what are you going to rely on? What's going to be used in the grants world? What is going to be the final decision maker? And, it is an important thing because this is going to determine who's getting funded.
I guess the question is, how much is this going to delay from a timing perspective, right? So, there's been the rush.
FCC on their own is going to be delayed just from them doing that, and then extending that through the challenge process will be an even bigger one. And it's very exciting, the amount of money that is in the BEAD program, but also it's not immediate into projects.
Yeah, this is the way NTIA is put together, which I think is brilliant, is they're bringing the money to the states and they're allowing the states to pick the sub-grantees. So in my opinion, every state should have some type of an opportunity to be able to tell where are we served and where are we unserved. And they have to have the tools to give to those local communities to have educated decisions and have good intentional conversations around where are we going to get those shovel-ready projects? Where should we invest these funds, public or private? Where do we have to do that? And for the feds to get it down to that level where it's going to be at the county level or to the small action team that you have in your communities, for gosh sakes, this is a long process. So, you know, states need to take control. And Drew, I did read your article too, and I thought it was brilliant. You know, it's at that state level, and there needs to be some duplicative error. And I think eventually there's going to have to be some kind of collaborative approach around states have their maps, because all these states are really aggressive and they're big states doing their thing, you know, and so there's going to have to be some type of consensus where we come together and say, hey, our data, you know, against your data, let's talk about that.
Russ, when you did the maps in Wyoming and Washington, and you know, just your thoughts now, kind of looking from the outside, do the state maps tend to have a greater public facing component than we understand this new FCC map is going to have? Is that right?
Yeah, and that's one of the things, right? If you want to get the community engaged, allow them to see the information, allow them to participate. When they put a dot on the map, allow that dot to show up, right? So they can say, oh, look what I did. They'll tell their neighbors, hey, for us to really start to tell a story about what service we have here, or how poor it is, or how good it is, get your dot on the map, you know. So that's what it became, and it really became an opportunity for us to tell a great story in Washington. Allowed us to lead this. You know, Megan in her company helped us, you know, go after the first NTIA money, which we assumed was the priming of the pump for this next round of NTIA funds. And in fact, we were right. But because we had those maps and we had all that information, we were first in line. I think we had the first application in that last round of NTIA funds because we had shovel-ready projects at the community level built on mapping that we had done locally, you know. And I think you're gonna want to get that done right now in advance, well ahead of what's going on with the FCC mapping. You're gonna want to be able to start to identify some areas of need, and the states have to take that lead.